thing is called flooding, which is going to be the next step. When switches do not know the MAC addresses that are sending information to, what they do is flood. Flood means you're going to send out that information coming from the host. That was from my laptop. It's going to send out that information to every single host connected to it on that switch. So it's going to send it to the scanner. It's going to send to the maybe 3 other laptops. Maybe send it to anything at all that's connected to the switch. It will send it to all of them. That's what's called flooding. So like the way the word flood, oh yeah, push everything out. So it's going to push out that message to every single device connected to it through the different ports. So when it pushes it out through what we call flooding, every device now tries to identify, because on that message, on that frame, what is there is the data and the layer 2. Layer 2 is what has your MAC address. So it's not say, okay, this MAC address is not mine. For example, the laptop sees it, one laptop called laptop 2. And it's like, no, that's not my MAC address. So it discards the message. It goes to the next laptop and it's like, that's not mine. Discards the message. Remember, it has flooded it to all the devices on that network through the switch. To check the scanner will be like, that's not my MAC address, and to discard the message. And finally, it reaches the printer. The printer has a MAC address BBB on port 3. It's not like, oh, that's my MAC address. But of course, the the switch does not know that the printer has identified that is MAC address or anything. All the switch has done at that point is just flood. It just sent out the message. After it has flooded the message, let's say B wants to now reply. So B would now say, okay, I'm going to send this message back to my laptop, from the printer to the laptop. I remember that the printer, the switch already has a MAC address table that has my MAC address and the port number. Remember, port 1 is where my laptop MAC address is written with. So we have port 1, corresponding MAC address AAA belonging to my laptop. Now the MAC address BBB belonging on port 3 that belongs to the printer. The switch actually doesn't know that on that 3 it was the printer. It just sent out the message and like, okay, whoever has it will definitely get the message. Now, when I'm trying to now forward the message, the printer is trying to forward the message back to me. It will now know, okay, oh, that MAC address that was BBBBB, this is the port number, and then it will now add it again. So it has to learn to a new MAC address. Remember, it has function of learn, flood, and this is the last one, forward. When it's forwarding it now to my laptop, which has AAA on port 1, it doesn't need to learn again. It doesn't need to forward that message to everybody, because on its MAC address table already knows that our MAC address on port 1 belongs to MAC address AAA. So all it's going to do is just forward. So do you understand? It only floods when it doesn't know the MAC address. It forwards when it knows the MAC address. So those are the 3 basic functions of your switches: to learn a MAC address, to forward when it knows the MAC address, to forward a reply, then to flood to everybody on that switch when it doesn't know the MAC address. So those are the major things. We're going to take a quick break so that I can also rest and come back and tell you many things that happen with switches. And when we come back, I'm going to tell you the other things that happen with switches. We've learned about forwarding, flooding, and learning. We're going to talk about how, when we have 2 switches connected together, working on their own separate networks, how does that happen? How can we get something on one network A to network B in the other place through 2 switches? So don't go anywhere. Stay with me at 8.3 FM. This is the Youth and Tech Show.
Well done.
Thank you.
The MAC address.
Hi, Lawrence. Do you know if Mrs. Sonia is around there?
Yeah.
My phone.
Yeah, she is.
Okay, please can you help me collect my charger from her?
Madam Sonia?
Yes, she's with my USB cord. She borrowed it during the show.
You're going in after now, right?
I wanted to charge my phone because I want to connect. I know that's. No, no, you're done. I just took a break. I'm coming. I'm going back. No. But like 1:30 should work now. 1:32 or 2 self. Let's eat something back. Alright. All right. Welcome back from that short break. I hope that was short enough. Yeah, so it's still Sonia, your radio tech bestie. I think I like to say that. On it's 8.3 FM NYC Radio with the Youth and Tech Show. And so far, we've been talking about switches and how switches, facilitate the communication between hosts on the network. And I'm going to talk about having two different network switches connected together. That's like saying on a network, let's say network 1, we have a switch connected to like 4 hosts. Then on network 2, we have a switch also connected to like 4 hosts. Then these two switches are now joined together. It's like saying my house has a couple of devices, phones, laptops, televisions, some smart televisions, printers. Then my neighbor's house, let's say Amaka's house, also has the same thing: phones, laptops, televisions. Maybe she has a smart fridge. I don't know. Basically different hosts. Then she has a switch, obviously, that's providing all of this interconnection between her different things, and so do I have, and so also do I have a switch that connects all my devices together. Then we found a way to connect her switch to my switch through a port. Now the point is that I'm trying to get some things to Amaka's house without having to move, without having to stand up, or let's say Amaka's room without having to stand up, without having to move. So it's like I want to send, maybe for example, Amaka has a printer and I don't have a printer. So if I want to print some things, every time I have to go to her room. No. So I just ended up using a switch. But now I'm trying to say, okay, how are we going to have my own, let me say I want to send like something to print out. How will I have a file printed out all the way from my room, all the way from Amaka's room, through my laptop in my room, using those two switches that are connected together? Because remember, I have a switch controlling the host in my room. Those are like my devices in my room. And Amaka has a switch controlling her own devices. So how are we going to get these two things to work together? Now this is how it's going to work. So let's say I'm trying to get, something from my laptop to her printer in her own room. She has a switch A. I have a switch B. Now I'm trying to get the first thing we're going to do first of all is transfer my information from my laptop to the switch. So now my laptop is connected to the switch through, let's say, port 7. We've already spoken about how it works. Just a brief recap in case you're just joining us. From my laptop, we're going to have a data and, of course, a layer 2 header, which will constitute a frame. In frames, I'm going to talk about two things before we proceed. We call it unicast frame and broadcast frame. A unicast frame is when you're going to send an information and you know the MAC address you're going to send it to. So in that frame, you have the data and the MAC address, exact MAC address. So for example, if I'm sending from my laptop to the printer in Amaka's room, I know that Amaka's printer has a MAC address DDD and my MAC address is AAA. It's very simple. The layer 2 header is going to have the data, the IP address that's hidden inside the data. Then the layer 2 will now have my MAC address AAA as the source address and her MAC address DDD as the destination address. Very simple. But in a situation where I do not know her MAC address, we're going to perform something called ARP, Address Resolution Protocol. We talked about that last week. And that's usually a broadcast frame. An ARP is like a broadcast frame. A broadcast frame is a frame where you don't know the MAC address. You're going to put FFF as the MAC address. That MAC address means every single MAC address should get this message. That's what it means. A unicast frame would have the exact MAC address, just AAA, BBB, CCC, but if broadcast frame would have FFF, that's like 4 Fs in 3 places as the MAC address, so that it will ensure that that message is sent to every single host on the network. So that's how it works. So now going back to what we're talking about, I'm trying to get my my message from my laptop to the printer in Amaka's room. My laptop is connected to my switch A in my own room through port 1. and my MAC address for my laptop is AAA. Amaka's printer is connected through port 7 to her MAC address, to her switch rather, switch B, and her MAC address is DDD. Now we're on different networks. I'm in my own room, she's in her own room. She has her switch, I have my switch. The only thing connecting us is that both of our switches, A and B, are connected together. So now how are we going to move from my laptop to my switch, from my switch to her switch, from her switch finally to her printer? This is how it's going to work. So now, when I send my message, it's also like recap on what we talked about earlier. Imagine that my switch does not have any information on its MAC address table. A MAC address table is just a table that has port numbers corresponding with the MAC address of the devices connected to that port. Now, from port 1, which is where I'm connected to, my MAC address is AAA. When it goes to that port number, the switch is going to be like, oh, we're getting a message from somebody called AAA. That's how it identifies people using MAC address. AA is coming to us through port 1. So now I'm going to go to my MAC address table. That's like the switch saying, I'll go to my MAC address table and I'll write 1 AAA. It's like getting to meet someone for the first time, and then you're like, what's your name? What's your phone number? And then they go and put on their this thing on their phone, like their contact address, whatever thing, on their phone, on the app. And they'll just save the person's name and their phone number. So that's how it is. The switch is learning your name and number, which is again one of the major functions of a switch to learn. So the switch has now learned my MAC address and of course my port number. So on port 1, it will now put AAA as my MAC address. But that is not where it's going to end. Remember that the port is not where we're sending the message to. We're trying to get it all the way to the printer with a MAC address of DDD. And on this my switch has other devices, because in my room I could have a phone, a laptop, maybe a scanner, but I just somehow do not have a printer. So what's going to happen is that it's going to now it's going to flood the ports and send that message I was trying to send to every person on that switch, because it doesn't know where it's going to. It doesn't know anybody having a MAC address with DDD. So when it sends it, it will send to port 2, port 3, port 4, port 5, to send to everybody. Now through that port, remember that through switch A, we're connected to switch B through a port. Let's say switch A is connected to switch B through port 2. It will not send it through port 2. Port 2 will not send it to the switch B. Switch B will not get a message like, I got a message from switch 2. So let's say somehow 2 are the switches that we use, are the ports we use to connect the two switches. So since I just got a message on switch 2 on port B, that's Amaka's room is like now in focus. Amaka's switch is like, oh, I just got a message through port 2. And on port 2, I got a message with source MAC address, AAA, because that is the same message that is going to every port. AAA as the source and destination as DDD. And it's like, okay, but me too, on my MAC address table, I don't have any DDD. So what it's going to do next is flood again. It's going to flood to every port on that switch to ensure that the person that actually owns it gets it. So let's say on that Amaka's room switch, we have someone on the port that is using a scanner. The scanner will say, okay, sorry, mine is EEE. So since it's not DDD, it's going to discard the message. It's going to maybe her phone. Her phone is CC cents, like, oh no, that's not my MAC address, and then to discard the message. Finally, you get to the printer, and the printer is like, oh, that's my MAC address, DDD on port 7, and then it will get the message. Because it has to maybe give me a reply that, okay, well, I printed this, for example, I printed this, and here is something else again. It's trying to send it back to me that is on AAA. Now, that switch in Amaka's room has already learned that on port 2, she got a message with AAA, even though that's not the original person that sent it. But because that's how that switch got the address, got the information, so now say, okay, on my MAC address, I have AAA that belongs to switch 2, belongs to port 2. So the printer will now send it to port 2 because no big deal, just send it straight to port 2. And so I realized, okay, I just realized something. From port 7, there was somebody attached to me that has DDD as a MAC address, that's the printer. It's now, again, save it on the MAC address table. It's not really all that long because it happens so quickly, but this is literally how it just works. So it's now send again to port 2. Port 2 is like, okay, I have this MAC address AA, which is mine, but they're trying to send it to port to AA, which is not really originally mine. So to send it to switch A, which is my room switch. My room switch is like, okay, my MAC address, I already had number 1 set to AA, which is my laptop. No need for flooding, no need to start finding out who has it. It's on my MAC address table already, so it's very simple. It will just simply forward it. So again, learn, forward, flood. These 3 things happen no matter the switches involved, no matter how many they are, no matter if it's just one switch to a couple of devices, two switches to many devices. We're doing the same functions all over again, which is to learn the MAC address, to flood when we don't know the MAC address, and finally to forward when we're sending back to a MAC address that we already know. So those are the 3 major things that happen with switches. So I hope somehow you've been able to know, at least to quite an extent, how switches are working to transfer communication to facilitate communication between different hosts over the network, and how they can even communicate between other switches like themselves on the network. So this is simply how the whole thing just works. We're going to take a break, and when we come back, we're going to take some tech news and call it a wrap on today's edition of Youth and Tech Show with me, Sonia, your host. XAI's Grok chatbot open source. Bitcoin has record about $1,000 estimated 2025. UK allows blah 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 blah. Most recent year is this. Like this is not the other news. Yes, hey. Wow, that's serious. This needs a lot. Carry 61 more scrap per year. And then a white gold. Yeah? What's going to put this on? Can't believe that. Alright, welcome back to the Youth and Tech Show on 8.3 FM NYC Radio. It's still me, Sonia, and now we're going to take in some tech news. First of all, on Reuters, these are the news headlines we have. EU commissions use of Microsoft software breach privacy rules, Watchdog says. Elon Musk takes another swing at OpenAI, makes XAI's Grok chatbot open source. Bitcoin hits record $71,000 as demand frenzy intensifies. UK allows professional investors to use crypto exchange traded notes. US senators seek to relocate government spectrum to boost 5G networks. NVIDIA is sued by authors over AI use of copyrighted works. Next autopilot trial to test Tesla's blamed the driver defense. NVIDIA on cusp of overtaking Apple as second most valuable company. Silicon Box invests $3.5 billion in new chip plant in Italy. I'm moving over to CNN Tech News. This is what we have. Apple iPhone sales fall 24% in China amid competition and headwinds. Health insurance giants roiled by cyber attacks set up loan program for cash-strapped health providers. We each have an average of 100 online accounts. Here's how to make sure they aren't a nightmare for your family if you die. Federal appeal courts throws out lawsuits against Apple, Google, Tesla, and other tech giants over alleged child labor in Congo. AI is not ready for prime time. That security camera and smart doorbell you're using may have some major security flaws. Obviously, that's an editorial. Then we have other TV star shaking after Jaguar brakes failed during drive. TikTok sparks user revolt in US over sale plan. Spider-Man battles Baldur's Gate in BAFTA Games Awards. Police feared Burmese accent bias in callbots. And finally, Joe Biden says he would sign bill banning TikTok. Roswell UFO sightings can be explained by classified program, Pentagon reveals in new reports. 4 astronauts blast off to International Space Station for 6 months stay. Apple fined 1.5 billion euro for not notifying users of cheaper music streaming options. Technical issue blamed for Facebook and Instagram problems which hit thousands of users. And finally, Bitcoin value hits new all-time high. If you're just joining us, we've been talking about, of course, switches. Talk about it for most of the program, how switches communicate between themselves, and how they will communicate on separate networks, say one switch to many hosts, and different switches connected together from different networks. It has been an amazing time on Youth in Tech Show, and most importantly, I've had such an amazing time talking about something I really enjoy with you, and just knowing that you're listening on the other side and getting more and more informed, enlightened, and just empowered on youth and tech. On the Youth and Tech Show. Once more, my name is Sonia, and it's been an amazing time with you. And this is where I say bye bye. And do stay tuned for My Language, My Heritage with Glenn, and of course I don't want to, what will I call them? Glenn and his people. Yeah, his tribesmen. Not really his tribes, I'm just joking. But yeah, do stay tuned for more to come by 1 p.m. with Youth and Tech. With My Language, My Heritage. I think I just don't want to leave you guys. That's why I keep on saying Youth and Tech. But My Language, My Heritage coming up by 1 p.m. on 86.3 FM NYC Radio. Bye for now.
So,
Glenn,
so me and my people will come by 1 o'clock.
It's not by 1 if you are coming.
My tribes.
No, your tribes,
Okay, guys. All right, catch me live.
Your own songs out.
Yeah, it's the time. So by 1 o'clock, and my tribes.
Tribesmen.
Yes. You don't want to leave my people. He keep mentioning my youth and tech. All right, guys. Catch us live by 1 p.m.